Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to our next webcast that we're bringing you from Travel Weekly as part of our Roadmap to Recovery series. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Kelly Craighead, who is the President and CEO of Clia, the Cruise Lines International Association, and she's joining us from the States. She is in charge of the global Clia. So we're delighted you could spare the time to join us today. Kelly, how are you?
Lucy, thank you so much for having me. I'm terrific. I'm actually talking to you from Washington, D.C., so there's a lot of activity going on, and it makes me really hopeful for a new year and a new restart to cruising, and so I'm just delighted to have the chance to talk to you today.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, we will come on to all of that. This is the first time we've spoken to you, though, since the start of the pandemic, so I don't want to rake over too much ground, but if you could just give us a sense of how your cruise line members, first of all, are faring. Obviously, it's been a really tough time. I've spoken to many of the executives during this period, and they were all hoping that by the end of 2020, they might get ships back in the water. That's clearly dragged on now, and some of them have announced pauses in operations, quite far into 2021. So how are they faring?
Right. Well, certainly 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, not just the cruise lines, but the entire community that supports cruise lines. I don't think anyone could have predicted the length of the suspension that we voluntarily agreed to come March. But I do think that there is hope. I think the successful sailings in Europe this summer gives us continued hope. We have a lot to talk about, but one of the things will be Clia's new member policy that will help provide support and guidance to support resumption. So I think it's been challenging, but there is a great deal of hope that 21 will be a much better year.
Okay. And in terms of, we were on the call with Carnival Corporation the other day, and, Arnold Donald previously said, he had a long runway of financial support to make sure that they could, last. And I think he said recently that actually he could last all of 2021 without any revenue. But are all cruise lines in that sort of situation, or is there concern for some of your members that, if this does go on for too much longer, it could be very tricky?
Right. Well, so remember, Lucy, that Clia represents the whole cruise community. So it's the cruise lines, it's our travel agents and agencies, and it's many of the suppliers that supply cruise lines. So for our members, it is a challenging time for small and medium-sized businesses, whether that's a cruise line, whether it's an agency, or whether it's a supplier. And so I think there are some who will survive this. I think there are others that are going to be really challenged. The good news is that our community is incredibly resilient. So I know at Clia, we're doing everything we can to support all of our members through this challenging time. And again, looking for those opportunities to advance a really rigorous set of protocols that have demonstrated already that it is an opportunity to see the world through sailing. And so we're really focused on that.
Okay. And in terms of, you talk about resumption and the protocols, which I know you've worked so hard on, and everyone's really collaborated to formulate those. But in terms of sort of timescales now, is it all really hinging on the vaccine rollout, or what will now affect when we can actually, I know we haven't got crystal balls, but when, what is going to really influence when that restart date can be announced?
Right. So certainly the promise of a vaccine is very exciting. But I think that in itself is going to be a long process, and the ability to rely on vaccine as a mode of enabling travel is going to take a while. So for us, we really are always going to rely on that multi-layered approach that our Clia COVID member policy really speaks to, because there isn't a single silver bullet in this instance. We do feel very comfortable and confident in the protocols that have been advised by outside medical and health experts to really take you from the point of booking to disembarkation in a way that really enhances all of the health and safety measures that are in place when you cruise. So we'll continue to rely on those sets of protocols, even as the vaccine and the rollout and the distribution and the adoption of the vaccines really come into play over the next year.
Okay, because actually you mentioned, obviously, some lines had resumed sailing in the summer, I think in the Mediterranean and also in Asia.
Mhm.
So they were using some of these, well, all of the protocols, weren't they? Were employing those, and that was working well. So you're saying that even if the vaccine rollout is very successful, and a lot of people are vaccinated, then you're saying the protocol would still stay in place.
Absolutely. So it's, this is, I think our own Andy Harmer frequently says, return to cruising is not going to be the flipping of a light switch. This is a little bit like a dimmer, and we're going to continue to grow and build and hopefully return to that great pattern of growth that we were on. But it is going to be a phased approach, and the protocols and the use of vaccines will continue that very measured, very controlled, phased approach, because there's no greater priority for our cruise line members, and in fact the entire cruise community, than the health and well-being of not just our passengers and crew, but the destinations we visit. So clearly we're part of the travel and tourism community that's struggling with all of these issues. But in the meantime, because we've adopted this really robust, stringent set of measures that have been informed by experts and have been proven effective this summer in Europe and in Asia, we remain hopeful. And so you'll just see that kind of full suite of enhancements to just make sure that we're able to see the world in the way that we've been able to see it, making cruising the best way to see the world.
Yeah.
So a little bit of everything over the course of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know testing on departure is something that was really, or is really important. So people are going to be tested before they board, but there won't be a requirement then to have a vaccination certificate that you'd still take, cruise lines would still take passengers even if they hadn't been vaccinated. That's because
right.
of the
We're
testing.
going to continue to work with local authorities everywhere that we want to and can sail, and we'll always follow the advice and guidance of all the health authorities. We can expect in the early days, again, as the vaccine is not widely available in all of the places that we need to be and want to be, that the same will hold true in terms of the expectation around testing, the expectation around wearing masks, the expectation around physical distancing. And so again, there's no hard, fast deadline that we've set for ourselves from where we move between the phases. The vaccines are obviously one of the most exciting developments, but just like everything else, it's going to take a little bit of time. And so having this multi-layered approach is really going to be our focus as we look to resume when the season starts back up in the places where we're able to do that.
Absolutely. Kelly, give us a sense of what's happening in the States at the minute. Obviously, we're in the UK, we're in full national lockdown because our infection rates were rising, new variants of COVID. So, it was, talking about it being out of control, and we're trying to bring that back under control, obviously. Clearly in the UK as well, we've got, foreign office advice against cruising. So tell us what's happening in the States, what the situation is there, because we often look to the States to see what's happening. Obviously, the big lines are based there as well. So give us an idea of what's happening so we can perhaps have hope for the UK.
Right. Well, we're a little bit similar in that we also have rising rates here. And in fact, the trajectory is predicted to be much worse as we come into March, particularly in the places where we're already seeing rising rates and limited access to hospitals. And so, we are in lockdown in varying degrees in different states. But we remain hopeful. I'm very pleased to say that our cruise lines are in active conversation with the CDC. Always mindful of kind of the expectations and the requirements. So the ships that are operating to and from U.S. waters or would like to be operating from U.S. ships and waters are working very closely with the CDC to meet the expectations of a conditional sail order. In addition, we're speaking with other governments to really help shape and advise and point to some of the successful approaches like we've seen coming out of the EU with EU Healthy Gateways and EMSA. And again, our Clia COVID policy is a way to just engage with governments with where they're at, where their populations are with the virus, to just be an active, good partner in how we do this together. Because not only is cruising just really one of the best ways to see the world and all of the fabulous things that we know about cruising. But we also are an economic generator. And so as we are in Washington, are looking to a new administration coming in, we really have aligned priorities about putting health first and foremost and quickly getting back to business, because it does support so many jobs. And in fact, in the United States, more than 421,000 jobs are created by the cruise industry, which is quite significant. And again, it's that haven in a storm. It's the many small and medium-sized businesses that are really reliant on the cruise industry getting back up and getting back to business. So again, we're looking forward to really demonstrating our commitment to putting people first and to demonstrating the effectiveness of this kind of really comprehensive approach to enhanced health and safety measures, and demonstrating how you can do both, provide for the public health and be an economic generator. So we are in fact very much looking forward to the year ahead.
Yeah, and you mentioned right at the start that you're hopeful. You're in Washington. You've got the new administration. Do you? I mean, you don't have to start all your sort of lobbying efforts all over again because it's a new administration, do you? Or what? Explain to me sort of what the next step would be. With you've got a new president coming in. What's his view on the cruise sector? I mean, have you had a chance to talk to his advisors or anyone yet?
Sure. So, for us, because Clia represents, again, this wider cruise community, we have, I think, nearly 50,000 travel agents in North America alone. And these businesses are really a big part of Clia's focus as we look to a new Congress that has come in and a new president. So it's really the entire package of the federal government, and making sure that all of these small and medium-sized businesses, these travel agents that Lucy, are so dependent on the cruise industry being successful, that as soon as there's an opportunity for us to weigh in on their behalf in any of the relief packages that might be moving, it will be a top priority for us. In terms of resumption from the cruise line standpoint, this is really with the health authorities, where there is a going concern regardless of administration. And again, we believe that through our commitment to a COVID policy around the world, particularly for those governments who have not developed yet their own protocol, to be able to operate in a manner that is really consistent with putting health and safety first, is something where we've put our focus. And again, we're working closely with the CDC to really meet their expectations, which might be more or different than what we've put forward. But we're hopeful because we do believe that the advice that we've gotten, the commitment that the cruise lines have made to go over and beyond, I think you saw a little bit of this fall when we were the very first industry to commit to 100% testing of passengers and crew before they got on a ship. And so leading the way in travel and tourism is where the cruise industry wants to be, where I think we'll continue to be. And I think because we have so much to point to and to demonstrate, that as a new government takes place in Washington, we look forward to the opportunity to really sharing that commitment and to working productively with them, again, to solve and address one of the greatest health emergencies of our time. So health and safety first, and then right back to business.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it was announced this morning, MSC were going to resume their sailings in the Mediterranean for Italians only, but that's good news because they're obviously going to be back operating. And I know Royal Caribbean were out in Asia, but I mean, there's others as well that have been starting. And I think just before or at the end of last year, some lines in America that, in the US, you were going to sort of do not passenger sailings, but you're going to start sort of having some sort of operations. So when do you think that will, in the US particularly, these sort of test cruises that we've talked about? So can you just sort of talk us through,
Sure.
how that restart will be with these test cruises and perhaps in the States and then obviously elsewhere?
Yeah, and well, let me just take one step back. There are governments in Italy and Greece and others have been really productive partners with the cruise industry. And I think that's why you were able to see nearly 150,000 passengers sailed this summer between Europe and parts of Asia. And again, the intention is to mitigate the risk of COVID. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're always going to keep COVID because no place is immune to it, 100% off a ship, but are there plans in place? Are we able to address issues and situations? And that's what the protocols really do successfully, is just mitigate that risks to the greatest extent possible. And that's why I think you are seeing some appetite at both levels, the consumers, which remains very strong because we know that cruisers love to cruise, but also with governments who are looking to pave a path forward for resumption. And so we're really excited about what we're seeing percolating up with some of our member line countries. In the US, I think the concepts that were recommended by the Healthy Sail panel that we look to advise the ability to really test the protocols. And so this concept of testing and measuring and improving based on findings is a concept that we adopt and embrace because we do want to make sure that we are providing, all of the enhancements that the best of science has told us is possible. So the method of, the rate of, kind of the details behind how and when this works in large part will be dictated by our conversations with the CDC. But the concept and the commitment from the cruise lines, again, is to measure and test and evolve and improve and adapt, again, to just create just this unparalleled experience in travel tourism.
But a test cruise would be from one place with taking people, not picking up people in lots of different destinations, and it would probably be to just private islands or not calling in too many places. Is that sort of the plan, and just to make sure all the protocols are working initially?
Well, so sorry. So your question about kind of how would this idea of test sailings work is something that is evolving and is really dependent on each of the authorities we work with. But the broad concept is limited phased-in resumption. So it could include things like sailing only to a private island and back, or only to a destination that has worked in close partnership with the cruise lines to adopt the same protocols. Because again, we're looking to be able to test these systems that have everything to do with, how you get on the ship, what happens while you're on the ship, the fun stuff, and the important medical parts, as well as the shore excursion. So the concept is really around, doing a phased approach to master each step in a way that really builds confidence, not just with our consumers who, again, our research has shown there is an appetite to cruise and a willingness to adopt some of these safety measures like wearing masks, which is terrific. And so now it's working with the governments to make sure that they feel safe and comfortable with the approach as well. So the underlying commitment remains the same around the world, and then the adaptation is really driven in part by the partnership with the health authorities and the destinations that we visit.
In the different places, yeah. Okay, understood. Let's come back. I definitely wanted to pick up on the consumer demand, and that's really important, and looking ahead. But just before we move on, obviously in the UK, I mentioned it earlier, we've got this situation where, the Foreign Office is advising against cruising per se, and I know we're all in lockdown. There's no travel allowed at the moment, so we understand that. But before that, there was a degree of frustration here because other things were allowed. People were able to go where there were travel corridors, there were flights going, and I think the cruise industry felt a little bit sort of singled out and felt that was unfair, given what you've said about how no other industry has gone as far as you have in terms of committing to full testing, etc. Is that a frustration that you share? I know certainly, the executives in the cruise industry in our country are feeling that. Is that something that you share? And when we come out of this national lockdown, do you think they will still be penalising cruise, or do you think that it will have as good a chance as any of resuming cruise along with other travel?
Right. Well, again, we don't have a crystal ball, but what I do know is that the situation in the UK was not necessarily unique to the UK. Having served in government myself, I'll tell you that it is challenging to try to be in the middle of a world health pandemic to sort through priorities and where airlift and the movement of people really intersect with what is so critically important to many economies, which is tourism. In some of the areas of operation, tourism is a much smaller part of GDP. So it just really does create a little bit of a lumpy experience as it relates to creating a traveler experience in the leisure side of things. That is only to create some space to say that all things are important. We're an important partner in the travel and tourism industries. Cruising is a critically important part of many countries' economies. And so we need to continue to tell our story about the measures that we've taken and to be able to really demonstrate that we are an extraordinary part of this experience. There is this pent-up demand. There is a pressing economic need. And so moving forward really is to continue to work as closely as we can with governments to help both share what we've learned from experts, point to what we've demonstrated can be effective, and find these partnerships to really advance the cruise experience as they look to expand the traveler experience beyond essential travel and business travel. And that's where I think we really have an opportunity this year. So it is frustrating to not be first at the table with many of the other kind of sister industries in the larger travel and tourism world. But cruising really is a leader in how we've addressed the enhancements that are in place and the experience that passengers and guests will have on cruise ships. So I'm optimistic that our ability to convey that information and to have that validated, not just from our word or the word of our members, is something that we're able to do, we will do. And I think that, again, comes back to what I think we'll talk about next, which is the consumer confidence. If you are a cruiser, you do know the lengths to which these cruise companies go to already have in place health and safety measures. And now that we're in the middle of a health emergency like we are, the extent to which these companies have gone and will go to provide for health and safety of all the people that they interact with is again something that will be a point of pride as we move forward, and consumers know that, and I think that's why
cruisers know it. We know it in travel, and obviously the cruise industry does. And I know Andy Harmers and his team have been doing a phenomenal job with their lobbying efforts. So, but it is just a case you're saying of we've got to just keep that message up to government to make sure that they do understand that and we get that across.
Right, absolutely. And Andy and his team have done a great job. We have a great team working throughout Europe and Australasia and North America. We work closely with our partners in the Caribbean. And so, you know, again, the real hard work has come from our members and their commitment to this and the importance and investment that they've made. And I, you know, shoot me for saying this, but there is a little bit of a silver lining in the pause in operations, because it really has enabled the industry to come out as successfully as they were able to do, executing against protocols this summer that, when they were enforced, proved effective. And it really is a pathway. Again, this partnership with governments is critical. It's why the EU and their ability to create a framework that was created both by EU Healthy Gateways and by EMSA really supported this responsible resumption to service. And so both communicating where there are approaches that other governments can look to, and by demonstrating the cruise industry's commitment to these stringent, you know, phased in approaches, I think will be a winning combination, because we do need to get back to work, all of us, and we need to do it in the safest possible way. So you can see a confluence of when all these things come together. You know, both the adherence to protocols across the entire supply chain of travel, the rollout and the availability of vaccines, the ability to better understand what we're dealing with and how to mitigate against it, is going to be a really successful 21.
Okay. 21. So it's going to happen this year at some point. We don't know when, but hopefully this year we'll have that confluence, as you say, of all those different factors.
That's right.
I'm conscious of time, and we're really grateful for you sparing so much time, Kelly. But just let's talk about consumer demand. You've mentioned it a couple of times. I know a lot of the lines are saying they're well booked really for this year, although some of them are already having to move some of those bookings again because they were for early part of this year and they're having to move them into the second half. How much of what's booked in 2021 is from future cruise credits from cancelled bookings last year, and what's happening with new business? You know, are we still seeing new bookings coming in, or is it all those kind of rebooks for this year?
That's actually an excellent question. I don't know the degree to which it's rebooks versus new books, but I know personally, anecdotally, from the cruisers in my family, and I have a couple of crazy cruisers in my family, they've already booked, separate from any cruise credit that they've gotten, 4 cruises for 21 and 22.
Okay.
So I only know anecdotally that there is, at least in my family, a preponderance of people who are booking ahead, and it's new bookings. The new to cruise segment is something that before the pandemic was something that Clia's members were really focused on.
Yeah.
There's so much appetite. I think you saw recently in our State of the Industry report, you know, millennials as a whole new to cruise segment for whom cruising is such a great way to see the world. And we do have a number of new ships that are on order and will be coming online. So again, that need to meet demand is really going to require the industry to again tell their story, to get the word out about the measures that are in place and start to attract those new cruisers.
And is there any concern? Are you worried at all that, you know, because new to cruise was such a crucial thing, you know, that's what we talked about in every conference, trying to, you know, spread the word of how fantastic a cruise holiday was, and because we needed to fill all this new capacity coming online. You know, I know some ships have been sort of moved on in this pandemic. People, you know, lots of the lines have got rid of some of their older tonnage, but is there a concern that the balance won't be right, that we'll have too much capacity and not enough demand?
Well, I think that's you know, even a blind man could see that there will be some challenges if we can't really effectively communicate what we've put in place and have the ability to operate. I don't think it is as much a focus as it is about just having resumption occur and starting to grow to scale. But again, just like our cruise lines have confidence in the protocols that they have adopted and are employing and will be deploying as more and more cruising takes place over the course of the year, you know, there's confidence in the idea that cruising is the best way to see the world. You know, whether you're a multi-generational family, whether you're a millennial, you know, whether you're older, whether you're younger, whether you're single, it really, you know, one of the things that is interesting to me is that people don't know that there is a cruise for them. And there is an idea that cruising is one thing or another thing. And when in fact, you know, Lucy, it is the whole wide world of different experiences and different opportunities.
Absolutely.
And so again, I'm hopeful that with resumption brings the opportunity to really point to all of the exciting new additions that will happen in Expedition, that will happen in some of these new ships. And again, to be in that place where we were before the pandemic, to work in partnership with destinations, to be good stewards, and to provide and deliver in partnership these world-class, one-of-a-kind experiences. Because for me, it's really the power of bringing people together. And that opportunity is what excites, I think, our members the most. It excites me the most. And it really is the promise that comes when we're able to start.
Okay. And I know you mentioned millennials there and other sort of new to cruise market, but actually the older market, there's been reports in the UK this week that, of course, because they're going to be vaccinated first, you know, that actually they may well lead the charge. They may well lead the sort of the demand for getting back to travel, and cruise will benefit from that, because even though we are attracting younger people, it's clearly an older market that's been very popular for cruising. So, you know, is that something that you think actually could well, you know, be seen this year as we see the more mature market come back to traveling first?
Right. I think that I always go back to the hope and the caution around the vaccine, because of what I know the World Travel and Tourism community would be grappling with. It would be great if that was the case. But again, it's not something that we're relying on, and it certainly will be a benefit to be on cruises with, a multitude of vaccinated people. But I hate to get a little too far out in front of that as this is all still rolling out and some of the highest rates are in front of us. older, younger. We look forward to welcoming everybody, and again, having the measures that will meet the moment and the place and time that we are when we have this opportunity again to get back to business, to achieve what I think was the trajectory we were on. That is really exciting because it will be mature audiences and it'll be millennials, and it will be great.
And when do you think, Kelly, we will be back on that trajectory? I mean, clearly it's going to be tough for a couple of years. Is it 5 years off before we're back? I mean, because we were having record years, weren't we, in 2019? Yeah. Everyone was doing really well. We had all these new ships coming on. So how soon do you, I mean, you must have done some modeling, and what do you think, how long do you think it will take before we're back on that trajectory?
Well, there's very much a range of opinions on it. But again, I think there's reason to be hopeful that this is, a 2-year problem, not a 5-year problem, to really, to really be able to meet demand, which is always going to be a challenge pre-pandemic because there is so much demand and the demand is growing. So again, our challenge at Clia as the body, as the International Trade Association that is representing all of the wider cruise community, it's making sure that these businesses can be whole and operate so that cruise ships can succeed when governments let them resume. And so our focus at Clia is very much on the support of our members of all varieties, because without a thriving cruise community, it's going to be tough to meet our full potential. But again, we're resilient. Our community is resilient. We're unified. It's going to take a tremendous amount of unity and resilience for us to get through the next 9, 12, 18 months. But again, I think the hard work, the deep engagement of experts and the commitment to excellence and putting people first is going to be what's going to show us through each of these moments along the year in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, well, you make a brilliant point, because of course we see you doing this fantastic lobbying role and working with all the health and safety departments and authorities, but it is about communicating with your smaller agent members too, and keeping them educated and motivated, helping them with their financial situation to make sure they're there. And I know that's something that Clia's been really focused on, as well as all the kind of government stuff as well.
Yeah, it really is what makes the cruise industry such an exciting place to be, because we can walk and chew gum, and the lobbying efforts that have been I think around the clock since the beginning of last year obviously always takes the kind of the foreground of the discussion and the debates that are happening, because full resumption is so critical. But almost in equal measure, the work around professional development, the ability to knit the lobbying with access to relief, and to try and have a seat at the table in Europe, in North America, to really look for that opportunity to be part of the economic recovery is something that we equally focus on that isn't covered as much. But I'm pleased to say in the US, for example, the number of agents that are going through our professional development programs and are becoming accredited, and our team's ability to really adapt, to do virtual ship visits, to be able to connect agents to the cruise lines and start to help them make the case for new to cruise travelers, has really benefited from our focus on just this part of our membership that just is critical to the industry's success.
Brilliant. All right. One last question and then I will let you go. But do you think, Kelly, that cruising has changed forever from this, health emergency? I mean, I guess if those protocols you're talking about are going to remain for a while, but will they remain permanently? And, will we see growth sort of like we did before? Do you think, it's changed irrevocably?
Well, I mean, I was around after 9/11. I was a traveler before 9/11. I was a traveler after 9/11. I can only look to this experience as something equivalent to just how drastically travel changed overnight once the health emergency was declared. And so I can only use that to predict that traveling in all segments will be different after the pandemic, and which of the protocols remain and which don't will really be dictated by the health advice of the authorities and other experts to help guide us. But what I do know is that however it is changed forever, cruise will continue to be in that center of excellence, that greatest way to see the world. And one of the things that has just impressed me about all of the cruise line executives that I work with is just their real attention to doing both and getting it right, getting the health and the safety protocol right, and always remembering that if it is not a transformational experience for cruising, then we have to find the balance. And they're really committed to doing both. And this idea that the cruising is the best way to see the world really is a driver in how to make sure that the hand isn't too heavy, but is exactly appropriate to what the health needs of the moment are. So however it changes, I know I have 100% confidence that it is going to be the best way to see the world.
Well, what a perfect way to end this interview, Kelly. You must listen. Thank you so much for all your efforts over the last 10 months, you and your team, and you must be exhausted from it all. We really cannot wait for a resumption of cruise, in all markets. But we're so grateful for all the work that Clia is doing, and thank you for joining us today, Kelly.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for you and the support of all the people who read and watch. It is going to take all of us, and we appreciate the support, and we need the support, and it's worth all of our efforts. And this is for me, for cruising, I'm very excited, but we're also really cognizant of the fact that we're in a moment that has just not been experienced in the world before. So we're just here to do the very best that we can, because we really believe in what we're trying to do. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, and I hope we can stay connected through the year. And I hope that
if I see you on a ship,
maybe on a cruise sometime.
On a cruise, yes, exactly. That would be lovely. All right, Kelly, we're so grateful for your time. Thank you for joining us. Kelly Craighead, who is the President and CEO of Clia. Thank you.